Alright, hey everyone, I am back with another One Piece video where I am tier ranking all of the arcs, and this will be part 4. Make sure to check out those previous videos where I have already covered everything up to Thriller Bark. This time, I'll be ranking the Summit War Saga of One Piece. These are the last 5 arcs of the Paradise Half the Grand Line, and kicking us off will be the Sabaody Archipelago. So grab a snack and get comfy as we discuss the Straw Hats' first true defeat and Luffy's journey to save his brother Ace from the clutches of the Marines. Alright, so starting us off is the Sabaody Archipelago. This is the island that the Straw Hats come to after their adventure in the Florian Triangle and gathering Brook as the newest crew member. First off, the crew actually comes to the red line and are a bit confused because the log pose keeps pointing down, which is leading to Fishman Island, but they have no way of getting there. The crew tries to sail down and look using the Sunny's new submarine, and while they're doing so, they encounter a large sea king and actually are able to save Papagoo and Kami. These are a mermaid and starfish that we are introduced during this arc, and we also get reintroduced to Hachan, the octopus fishman. Hachan was originally introduced all the way back in the East Blue at Arlong Park. He was a member of Arlong's crew. The Straw Hats are able to save these three from the Sea King, and Hachan actually is going to be the one that leads them to get their ship coded. He's from Fishman Island, all of them are, and they know how you need to get down there. You have to get your ship coded with these special bubbles that are produced at the Sabaody Archipelago. So the crew heads over there, and they land on the island officially, and we learn that Sabaody is not a normal island. It's actually made up of these hustle muscle mangrove trees that produce these special bubbles. The bubbles are used to coat ships, to go under the water. They are used as rides throughout town. They can also float up while they are in the territory of these hustle muscle mangrove trees. It's a really cool bit of more world building from Oda, and really shows off his creativity. As the crew is going through Sabaody, Hachan is leading them to this ship coder. They encounter some of the world nobles for the first time. This is where we are really kind of shown how awful and just terrible the world nobles, the celestial dragons, are. They are first shown actually blowing up and killing one of their slaves who used to be a pirate captain. Sharia and Roswald are the two world nobles that we're introduced to, and they are just complete pieces of scum and awful people. The world nobles actually wear these really weird, almost kind of like astronaut outfits, and they have these domes, these glass domes over their heads, so they don't have to breathe the same air as the rest of the lower folk out here in the common realm, as they would say. They are very haughty, think they are better than everybody else. They believe they are gods, and this arc kind of introduces them to us and shows kind of how awful they really are. The crew eventually makes it to Shoki's Ripoff Bar, which is where Hachan is leading them, and they meet Shoki. She is the owner of this bar and is the wife of Rayleigh, who is the ship coder that Hachan is looking for. Rayleigh is not here at the moment. However, Shoki tells everybody that they're more than welcome to go look for him, and also to be aware that there are a whole bunch of more pirates that have actually landed on the island. This is where the supernova are first mentioned. Shockey actually is the one that goes through and tells us about them, and we learn about all 11 supernovas here. This is where we are first introduced to Law and Kid, and where we learn that Luffy actually has a lower bounty than Kid. Luffy has a 300 million berry bounty, and Kid has a 315 million berry bounty. Shockey says this is because of Kid's ruthfulness and how he goes and just torches islands and kills civilians. He is much more ruthless than Luffy is. That's why he's got that extra 15 million. With these extra supernova and kind of pirates on the island, that has increased the tension and the Marines and everything, and Shockey just kind of tells Luffy and everyone else to be aware and on guard while they're walking around the island. As the crew leaves to go try to find Rayleigh, we actually get introduced to some slave traders. There is an auction house that is on Sabaody, and it runs selling slaves. Slaves are a big kind of proponent of the One Piece world. The world government, the world nobles, the celestial dragons specifically, use slaves for just about everything. And a auction house is not an uncommon thing to be seen in the One Piece world, and there happens to be one here on the Sabaody Archipelago. As the crew is kind of looking around for Rayleigh, they actually encounter some of these slave traders, and Kami, the fishman, or not fishman, the mermaid that they met at the beginning of this arc, gets captured, and she gets taken to this auction house to be put on display and sold and everything, and this obviously completely pisses off Luffy, and he has to go and save her. As this is going on, Zoro is actually kind of wandering around the island himself. He's gotten a little bit lost, as he tends to do, and he actually encounters another one of these world nobles. This one is named Charlos, and this guy is an absolute piece of scum. As Zoro is kind of walking around, there's apparently an injured person, or an injured Marine, and there is a doctor there trying to save them and everything, and Charlos sees one of these Marines, and is a female, and wants to take her as his wife. That's what these pieces of shit do, apparently. They see somebody and they just take them. Like, it's awful. Dude probably has 15, 20 wives, and he's just like, oh, I want that one there. So Charlos points to this lady, says he wants her to be his wife, and the doctor speaks up saying, hey, you can't do that, this is my fiance. And Charlos just straight up shoots the dude. No questions asked, nothing, just shoots him. Zoro witnesses this happen and goes to confront Charlos and being like, what the hell, dude? And Zoro begins to try to start cutting him down as Charlos fires at him. Obviously, Zoro easily dodges the bullet, but before Zoro is able to cut him down, Bonnie actually shows up out of nowhere. This is, I think, our introduction to her. As she goes and tackles Zoro and kind of knocks him to the ground. She takes the form of a small child and acts like she had gotten shot to actually deceive Charlos into just moving along and not caring about the whole interaction. Bonnie kind of explains who the world nobles are to Zoro and how you can't just cut them down and they can do whatever they want and they're basically gods. And he is like, why? Why is that allowed? How could that happen? And she explains that if anyone is to attack a world noble, that will summon an admiral. And admirals are one of the strongest groups that we currently know about in One Piece. It hasn't been really fleshed out yet. That's going to happen in a later arc during this saga. But here, Bonnie mentions that if a world noble is struck or injured in some way, an admiral will be summoned to defend them. Moving back to the auction house, Luffy has made it there to try to save Kami, and Roswald, Charlia, and Charlos are all here trying to participate in this auction. There is the really iconic scene where Luffy is gotten super pissed and just absolutely decks Charlos right in the face. It's been dubbed the punch heard around the world, as Luffy does not care about admirals. He does not care who is going to come and defend this piece of shit. He is hurting and trying to take one of his friends, one of his Nakama, and he is not going to allow that. So, of course, the Admiral shows up. It is Kizaru, and we kind of learn a little bit about him and shows off his light powers. And he actually fights Basil Hawkins and Mad Monka Rouge, and we kind of show off a little bit of the supernova powers there. While Luffy, Law, and Kid actually team up outside of the auction house and begin fighting some pacifistas that have shown up on the island. This shows off Law's and Kid's Devil Fruit and shows exactly how they kind of fight and everything. Once this wraps up, Luffy and the gang actually heads back to Shaki's bar, as Rayleigh actually showed up at the auction house, and this is kind of where they met. Rayleigh and everyone heads back to Shaki's bar, and this is where Rayleigh tells everyone that he is a member of Roger's crew, or at least was. He was Roger's first mate. Everyone is shocked by this. They didn't know, and Rayleigh explains that he knows what the One Piece is. Robin actually asks if he knows about the Void Century, and before Rayleigh can even get a word out to say anything, Luffy just kind of speaks up and shouts, "I don't know. I don't want to know what it is. Don't tell me. I don't want to go on a boring journey." And that just kind of shut it up right there. And this just kind of reminds Rayleigh, just kind of pictures Roger in his head. It gives him a memory of Roger. Like, this is something that reminds him of the Pirate King. Rayleigh promises to coat the Straw Hat ship in exchange for help out of the auction house and everything, and the crew goes to begin to leave. However, the whole island is in absolute panic with an admiral in town, a world noble being hit, and they are looking for the Straw Hats. Bartholomew Kuma has actually landed on the island along with the other pacifistas, and this is where the Straw Hats face their first and kind of only real defeat. Bartholomew Kuma, unbeknownst to them, goes and just decimates the Straw Hat crew. It is so sad and heartbreaking to see Luffy not being able to do anything, not being able to save his friends, as just one by one Kuma goes and pop, pop, pop goes, and as far as Luffy knows, he's killing them. That he is never going to see them again. They are dead. As we know, as readers of the story, Kuma is actually saving them. He's getting the Straw Hats off of the island and sending them places that are safe where they can go and learn and train and get stronger. But Luffy is unaware of all this, and he is just sobbing. There's the scene of him on the ground just looking up, and you see another one of his crew just pop, go away. Sabaody is a bit of a setup arc for kind of the whole Summit War saga here, and it's got some really cool world building. I do like that it introduces the supernovas. The supernovas were actually a bit of an add-on. Well, excuse the dogs in the back. A bit of an add-on by Oda. I believe one of his editors mentioned that it should be added. But I like the supernovas. I like all their designs. This is where Rayleigh is introduced, and Rayleigh is super cool and awesome. So I'm going to be putting Sabaody up in A tier. It's a really good setup arc. It drops a lot of lore and gives some more good world building and kind of expands a little bit more on the world nobles, how they interact with the rest of the One Piece world, and how everyone kind of sees them and how they treat Fishman and the rest of the world. And it just kind of expands Oda's world building. Moving on is Amazon Lily. This is the island that Luffy actually gets flung to by Kuma. He travels in Kuma's little paw bubble for 3 days and 3 nights and crash lands on Amazon Lily, the island of women. This island is completely blocked off from the rest of the world due to it being located in the Calm Belt. It is also a land that is entirely inhabited by women. Men are not allowed on the island. So when Luffy crash lands here, you can assume that's going to cause some issues. He eventually wakes up and he doesn't know where he is, of course, but he is hungry, as Luffy tends to be. He sees some interesting looking mushrooms, and so he just kind of starts downing those things. But apparently they end up being kind of poisonous, and he falls unconscious and is eventually found by a group of these women known as the Kuja. These are the inhabitants of Amazon Lily. The Kuja pick Luffy up and take him back to their village on the island, throw him kind of in like a cell, and they know what these mushrooms are, and kind of are able to cure him of the poison that these things are giving him. It's kind of a really weird poison. It doesn't hurt him necessarily. It just makes more mushrooms grow all over his body. So he's got some growing out of his chest, out of his arms, out of his head, out of his back, out of his legs. It's hilarious. So once the women get all the mushrooms off of Luffy, they had to strip him down and everything to like give him a bath and make sure they got all of them. They notice that he has another mushroom in between his legs. And so they start trying to pull it off, as that should not be there. It's a mushroom. It must have grown on him like all the other ones. It's a really hilarious scene. It actually takes one of the elders of the island showing up, Granny Neon, to explain that no, Luffy is actually a man, and that is not a mushroom, but his private area. All the women immediately are shocked and are flabbergasted, terrified, and angry. How could a man be here? What is going on? And they are mad. Granny Neon, who we learn a little bit more about during this arc, she was actually a previous empress of the island. The island of Amazon Lily has a ruling empress always, and it is determined by whoever is the strongest of the Kuja. The Kuja deem strength is beauty, so whoever is the strongest equals the beauty, it equals the most beautiful, and so they become the empress. The current empress of Amazon Lily is Boa Hancock. She is introduced during this arc, and she is a warlord of the sea. We actually meet her by her interaction with a vice admiral out at sea. After the whole interaction with Luffy and Granny Neon in the cell, we actually cut out to Boa's ship on the ocean as she is speaking with Vice Admiral Manga. They are talking about this coming war between the Marines and the Yonko Whitebeard. Portgas D. Ace has been captured and he has been set for execution. And the Marines are asking Boa, along with the rest of the warlords, well, they're not asking, they are forcing them to come and represent the Marines in this fight against Whitebeard. Boa does not want to do it. The only reason that she's a warlord to begin with is to keep the Marines from attacking Amazon Lily. And so she does not want to fight on the Marine side. She has no reason to. And she actually goes and turns the whole crew, the whole Marine crew, into stone by showing off her Marrow powers. Boa has the devil fruit to turn people to stone who believe she is beautiful, who kind of lust over her. And Boa is depicted as a very beautiful woman who everyone just kind of falls head over heels for and cannot control their urges, man or woman, it does not matter. And so she easily turns the whole Marine crew to stone and then just heads on back to Amazon Lily. When she gets there, she is told about the whole thing with Luffy and everything, and has him thrown in jail and stuff, and goes back to her palace to actually start cleaning off and get cleaned up from her interaction with Momonga. As she is in the bath here, Luffy is actually able to break out of his cell and crashes into the bath, kind of just breaking in, and of course this flabbergasts and shocks Boa as she kind of turns and immediately covers herself, and Luffy just kind of there with his stupid face and kind of looks at her, cocks his head, and he does not swoon over her like everyone else does. This kind of is odd to Boa, and she immediately screams at him and everything. And instead of him actually commenting on her beauty, he comments on something that is on her back. On Boa's back is the hoof of the celestial dragon. This is the mark that shows that someone was a slave of the world nobles. So this kind of leads a little bit into Boa's backstory. We learned that her, along with her sisters, Boa Marigold and Boa Sandersonia, were actually slaves of the world nobles that live on top of Mary's Joie. A long time ago, during their childhood, they were captured and got taken by slaves, and they were eventually freed when the Fisher Tiger, came and attacked the island and was able to free all the slaves. Boa and her sisters escaped, but were unable to make their way back to Amazon Lily, and Granny Neon is actually the ones that found them and brought them back to Amazon Lily. The current empress at that time gave Granny Neon, she let Granny Neon stay on the island and welcomed the Boa sisters back. Granny Neon had left her position as empress and was kind of exiled from the island, and by bringing the Boa sisters back, this was kind of how she was welcomed back on the island. So with Boa and her sisters back on the island, eventually she grows up and becomes the empress, and of course, though, she is very concerned and conscientious about the mark on her back, not wanting anyone to know that she was once a slave. So she is super pissed that Luffy sees this and declares that he is going to be thrown into the Colosseum to learn his lesson and be basically get beaten up by all the Kuja. So we cut to the Colosseum where Luffy has to fight Boa Marigold, Boa Sandersonia, and this is where armament and observation haki are kind of fleshed out a little bit more. Observation was first kind of shown all the way back in Skypiea by Inaru and his priests, but this is where it kind of gets fleshed out a bit, and we actually see armament haki for the first time with the vulcanization and hitting people and everything. This is kind of where it gets fleshed out. Luffy's able to defeat Marigold and Sandersonia to the surprise of Boa. And is able to kind of win his freedom a little bit. Boa gives Luffy an ultimatum. She tells him that he can either take a ship and leave the island, or he can give that up and let Boa turn some of her civilians back into stone. She actually turned to stone Margaret and Sweet Pea. These are two of the Kuja that had originally brought Luffy into the village when they were unaware that he was not a woman. And so Boa turned them to stone as kind of a punishment. And so Luffy, feeling bad, obviously they didn't do anything, he's going to save them. That's what Luffy does. So Hancock is surprised by this and did not think that's what Luffy would do. And this kind of where Boa starts to fall in love a bit with Luffy. She actually comes down with love sickness. This is a really weird kind of sickness that apparently only affects the Empress of Amazon Lily, as all the previous Empresses that we know about have contracted love sickness. Boa falls deathly ill, and the doctor has no idea what's going on with her and everything. Granny Neon is actually the one that explains what is going on here and tells Boa that she has to leave the island in order to overcome this sickness. Granny Neon is actually looking over the paper and everything, and this is kind of where Luffy finds out that Ace is set for execution. He sees it in the paper, and we kind of go into Luffy explaining that Ace is his brother, and Granny Neon tells Boa that if she is going to get over this love sickness, she must help Luffy go save Ace. She must take him off the island and go with him, and that will cure the love sickness. So that's exactly what Boa does. She gets off the island and actually takes up Momonga on his offer to help with the war, all as a ploy in order to get Luffy to help save his brother. Granny Neon states that he is currently held prisoner in Impel Down, the Marines' undersea jail, and that Boa, by way of Momonga and his marine ship, can get to Impel Down. The ocean around Impel Down is basically kind of like a whole bunch of whirlpools between Impel Down, the Gates of Justice with Enos Lobby and Marine HQ. It creates this kind of interesting triangle, and the only kind of real way to get into it is by being a Marine ship. These channels are covered by the Marines, by the Navy, and so no pirates are going to be able to get in there. You have to be with the Marines. So this is where we kind of lead into the next arc, Impel Down. But Amazon Lily, it's a bit of a setup arc. It introduces Boa. It has some really good gags between the Kuja trying to rip off Luffy's dick, and the whole scene with Luffy crashing into the bath and his just stupid face. It's got some good moments. Nothing too crazy. It's a lot of setup. So I'm going to be putting Amazon Lily in B tier. Moving on to Impel Down. This is where we kind of start getting into the meat of the Summit War Saga. Boa and Luffy have to infiltrate Impel Down in order to save Ace. Boa gets subjected to a bit of a body search, so she has to turn to stone one of the guards of Impel Down, named Domino. She is kind of one of the head jailers of Impel Down. So during this body search, as she begins to kind of strip and everything, obviously Domino gets lustful and she turns her to stone, and Luffy is able to kind of slink off of Boa's back where he was hiding this whole time, and heads on into the jail. Impel Down is separated into 6 separate levels. we start off on the first level, which is where we actually get reintroduced to Buggy. We are here in the first level, and Buggy has actually escaped from his cell. He was captured by the Marines and thrown in level 1 Crimson Hell here. As Luffy meets Buggy, they kind of team up a little bit, with Luffy offering the Captain John's armband that he found all the way back at Thriller Bark, because Buggy recognizes what it is and tells him that he will show him how to get down to level 4 for the armband. Buggy is lying, of course. Doesn't want to actually help Luffy. He just wants to get the hell out of here. But by happen chance, they actually make their way into the Crimson Hell, which is a just razor-sharp-edged, blood-filled forest that is covered in blood, and in the middle of it is a hole that leads down to level 2. So Buggy and Luffy head down there to level 2, which is the Beast Hell. This is where Mr. 3 Galdino is reintroduced, and his wax powers kind of play a bit of a large role in Impel Down kind of fighting through, and he actually comes up later at Marineford. But moving along, the group kind of grows. They eventually meet Bon Clay, also down in the 3rd level Starvation Hell. There is a big fight between Luffy and Magellan on the 4th level, the Boiling Hell. And this is kind of where Luffy gets badly poisoned and is no longer able to continue down through the jail. He kind of has to stop here. Bon Clay actually has he tries to run away, but then he turns and heads back and actually finds Luffy here, all poisoned and everything. Well, actually, I did that back. He did not find Luffy there. Luffy actually gets thrown into the Freezing Hell, level 5, and Bon Clay has to go down there to save him. He actually goes down shirtless, fights off a whole bunch of wolves, and grabs Luffy out of his cell and goes to try to find Ivankov. Ivankov is a jail member who Bon Clay is searching for. He wants to rescue him, as he was the leader of the Kamabaka Kingdom, which Bon Clay wants to go to. We actually do meet Ivankov during this, and we are taken to New Kamaland. That is where Luffy and Bon Clay kind of recuperate a bit, and Luffy is actually able to fight off the poison that Magellan, the warden of Impel Down, subjected him to. There is a great moment with Bon Clay cheering Luffy on for 8 hours straight. Just him cheering him on, saying, "You can do it, Straw Boy, you can do it. You can do it, Straw Boy, you can do it." And he just goes on and on and on for 8 hours straight, with the rest of New Kamaland and Ivankov eventually kind of joining in, until Luffy's screaming stops and blood starts pouring out from the door that he is behind, and everyone kind of thinks, "Oh shit, is he dead?" Bang, bang, bang! I want food! As Luffy's made it through, he fought off the poison and is able to continue the journey to save his brother Ace. Ivankov during this actually gets under the misconception that Luffy and Ace are Dragon's sons. So Ivankov is actually a member of the Revolutionary Army under Luffy's father, Monkey D. Dragon. Luffy explains that he is Dragon's son, and then he says that Ace is his brother, so Ivankov assumes that Ace is also Dragon's son. Originally, Ivankov planned on staying in New Common Land because he was waiting on Dragon's orders, but once he hears this, he's like, oh, hell no, we've got to go save Ace. Both of you are Dragon's sons. He's going to kill me if I don't do this. So, with the help of Ivankov and the rest of the newcomers, Luffy, Bon Clay, Buggy, and Mr. 3 Galdino all head down to level 6 and actually we are reintroduced to Crocodile and Daz Bones. This is where we meet Jimbei, and by the time they get down there, however, Ace is no longer in the jail. He has already been transferred to Marine HQ for his execution. So the crew has to hightail it back out and are actually helped a bit by Blackbeard infiltrating the jail also. He plans, or he does, take a whole bunch of the level 6 prisoners and breaks them out and has them join his crew. Luffy and everyone else is able to break out of the jail with the help of Jimbei, and a massive riot occurs. This is where Buggy gets the whole savior trope on him with all of the Impel Down escapees following Buggy and kind of leading into Marineford and Buggy's infamy growing from there. Impel Down is a great arc. It has a whole bunch of fights, introduces previous characters. The scenes with Luffy fighting off the poison and Bon Clay cheering him on. There at the end, when everyone is leaving, Bon Clay actually stays behind to let everyone else leave, and it's kind of up in the air, even to this day, if Bon Clay is even alive at this point. It has super high emotional points with Bon Clay completely just giving himself up to try and save Luffy. He goes back to save him, and they're not even on the same crew. They were enemies to begin with. And it just kind of shows how Luffy is able to bring people together. Like a lot of the people that help Luffy here in Impel Down were originally enemies, villains of the Straw Hat crew. Galdino, Buggy, Crocodile, Daz Bones. These are all previous antagonists that Luffy and the crew have defeated in some way or another, and honestly, they're the reason they're probably in jail to begin with. But they help Luffy get back out, and they make their way to Marineford to try and save his brother Ace. So Impel Down is a great arc. I really love it. I'm actually going to be putting it at the top of A tier. In a previous video, I had stated that there's only one S grouping, or only one S rank per grouping of videos. So, there's only going to be one of these. If I had multiple, Impel Down would definitely be S tier, but I'm going to put it at the top of A. As we move to Marineford, I'm just going to go and do it. This is the S tier. Marineford, arguably the best arc in all of One Piece. This is the Summit War in totality, the War of the Best. This is where Whitebeard is introduced, along with the 3 admirals pre-time skip. They get to show off all of their powers. We get to see a lot of the warlords fight that we have not seen before. We see Doflamingo. Kuma kind of shows off some extra stuff. We see Boa fight. We see Mihawk fight, like actually. It is a complete balls-to-the-walls, high-paced, just fast combat, slam-together arc. It is absolutely amazing. You have Whitebeard there with his crew and showing off everything they can do, being from the New World. Ace is revealed to be Roger's son, and the whole world reacts to how that how that even occurred. It is noted that the Marines apparently tried to go and kill every single mother that could have been pregnant with Roger's baby, but Ace's mom, Rouge, was actually able to hold Ace in her womb for like 20-something months to get out of the Marines' kind of hunt of babies. And the world finds that out, and it sends shockwaves to everybody. This kind of sends some of even Whitebeard's allies into a confusion, and it's highlighted by one of his allies named Squardo. Squardo is an ally of Whitebeard. He used to be on his crew, but eventually made his own crew and became a captain himself. But Squardo hated Gold Roger back in the day. And apparently Gold Roger actually annihilated his pirate crew. And so when Squard learns that Ace, the person that they have come here to try and save, is actually Roger's son, and Whitebeard did not tell him this, he is mad. He is pissed. He feels betrayed. He is, how could Whitebeard do this to me? I thought I was his son. And Akainu, one of the admirals, actually kind of riles Squard up and tells him that Whitebeard actually struck a deal with the Marines to let Whitebeard and Ace leave if the Marines kill all of the other allied crews. And Akainu kind of states that he doesn't agree with this and that he's going to kill Whitebeard and Ace only and let everyone else leave. And Squard believes this. He is so hell-bent and furious that Whitebeard did not tell him about Ace and that Ace is Roger's son. Squard actually goes all the way to Whitebeard's ship, the Moby Dick, and stabs Whitebeard through the chest. And you get an amazing scene where Whitebeard states that the sins of the father do not go down to the children. That it is foolish to hold children accountable for the sins of their fathers. It is an amazing quote. Whitebeard is just an amazing character, and just after he says this, just goes and hugs Squardo, and Squard drops the sword and just cries as he realizes he's being a fool here. Ace is not Roger, and you cannot hold someone accountable for what someone else did, whether they are related by blood or not. This moves Whitebeard into kind of more into the fight. He gets super pissed off, specifically at Akainu, and goes to join the fight and begins to kind of show off his Gura powers, his earthquake powers. You have Whitebeard versus Akainu. You have Luffy going and punching out Kobe to continue his journey to Ace. And eventually, Luffy actually getting all the way to encountering the three admirals. He tries to go and get up to where Ace is, but is stopped. And Ivankov has actually been kind of pumping him up with all of these hormones after Impel Down. Ivankov has the hormone fruit, and that is actually how he saved Luffy through the poison. And so he's given Luffy all these extra hormone shots to try to get him through this battle. And Ivankov stresses that if he gives him another one, it might kill him. But Luffy is stubborn-headed and won't take no for an answer. So Ivankov gives him another shot, and he goes and continues trying to save his brother Ace. It is just super powerful, the determination of Luffy. He is able to get all the way up to the scaffolding where Ace is being held, and the only person that is left in his way is his grandfather Garp, a vice admiral of the Marines. Garp has been in Luffy's life since he was a child. He is kind of seen to be the the grandfather of Ace also, and Garp states to Luffy that I am a vice admiral of the Marines and I am going to stand my ground. And so Luffy straight up punches Garp out. Garp kind of allows this to happen. We see later in a later arc in post time skip that how powerful Garp still is in this old age, and Luffy kind of punches him out in one hit, and he falls off the scaffolding. And Luffy is actually finally able to get to where Ace is. Sengoku, the fleet admiral, is having none of this, so he turns into his giant Daibutsu form and goes to destroy the scaffolding and take out Luffy along with Ace. He is in those sea stone handcuffs, so he shouldn't be able to use his devil fruit. However, one of the guards that was actually up there on the scaffolding turns out to be Gaudino. It is a big twist, and this is actually how Luffy is able to save Ace from his cuffs. Gaudino, using his wax powers, makes a key and turns it into the cuffs, and Ace is freed. A whole bunch of Marines actually open fire on the scaffolding, assuming this is going to kill him because Ace has the sea stone cuffs on, he can't use fire, but then big old flame appears, completely knocking away the bullets, and Ace is saved. He is freed, or so we think. Whitebeard tells all of his allies to retreat and head back to the New World, that he is going to kind of stay here and be a beacon for them to get away and stuff. And this is kind of where Blackbeard actually begins to show up. As Blackbeard is kind of off into the background and the Whitebeard crew is retreating and everything, Akai Inu begins just mocking Whitebeard, calling him a coward and saying that he's a failure, that he could never be king of the pirates, and this really pisses Ace off. And everyone is telling Ace to, no, come on, leave, we gotta go. But he turns around and faces Akai Inu and goes to fight him. He is not going to allow this man to just badmouth his captain, the person that he really sees as his father. Ace did not like that Roger was his dad, how everyone talked about him, and he sees Whitebeard as his true pops. And so when Akai Inu is bad-mouthing him, Ace cannot let this just slide. So he goes back to face him, and Akai Inu immediately turns on Ace, and they begin have a little bit of a scuffle. Luffy, seeing that Ace is not with him anymore, turns to go follow him, but after having all those hormones from Ivankov, his body is at its limit, and he just falls down onto his knees, defenseless. Akai Inu sees this and begins to prepare an attack on Luffy to try and take him out, as he sees this as a prime opportunity to take out a pirate who in the future could become a very large threat to the world government and the Marines. Ace is not going to allow his brother to die, so like a champ, he just goes and steps right in front of Akai Inu, and Akai Inu magma punches right through Ace's chest there in front of Luffy. Big old hole in it, completely torching his organs, blasting a hole through it. And Ace falls into Luffy's arms and dies. The last thing that Ace tells him is that he is thankful for Luffy loving him, and he dies with a smile on his face. It is one of the absolutely most heartbreaking moments in all of the story. This is the first death that we have during the actual main timeline of the story. We've had some in flashbacks, but during the actual current timeline of the story, this is the first death, and it really hits hard. It hits Luffy. He goes into shock. He can't do anything. Jinbei actually has to go and get him out of there, along with the help of the other Whitebeard pirates, with Marco and Vista and Jozu going and try to helping him out. Jinbei is barely able to get Luffy away from Akainu. Akainu goes and attacks him. That's how he has the big old X-shaped scar on his chest for the post-time skip. Thankfully, I think actually all of these supernova were actually watching this war from afar, and so Law, who is a surgeon, is actually the one who saves Luffy's life here. He just kind of does it on a whim. He doesn't really have a reason to, but he does it regardless. Once Luffy leaves the battlefield, this is kind of where Blackbeard really shows himself. The shadow behind Marine HQ is revealed to be San Juan Wolf, and Blackbeard is shown to have been there with all of these level 6 prisoners. This is where Whitebeard is killed by the Blackbeard crew. Before that happens, though, you have the great scene with Whitebeard kind of fighting Akainu a little bit, and about half of his face gets blown off. He gets a hole in his chest, and right there before he dies, you have Whitebeard announcing to the world, "The One Piece is real!" And it is a massive moment, sends shockwaves throughout the whole world. At Sabaody, they had actually set up a whole bunch of transponder snails to transmit the footage of this to the rest of the One Piece world. And so when Whitebeard says this, it shocks the whole world and sends pirates into an uproar, sends civilians into a frenzy. It is a major turning point in the world of One Piece and how they see events and how the story concludes from here. Whitebeard is killed. He actually takes 267 stab and slash wounds, 46 cannonballs, and is shot 152 times, but had never taken a single wound on his back because the dude does not retreat. It is one of the most Chad, strongest, just aura building moments and all the thing, and this dude just died. It is crazy, and this kind of shows that Whitebeard really was the strongest man on the world. That was his epithet, and him dying there on his feet really epitomizes it. This is where Blackbeard kind of goes in and steals the Guragura no Mi from Whitebeard's corpse. We still don't know how he did that. There's a whole bunch of theories, but whether it be he has multiple souls, or he has a certain devil fruit that allows him to have more devil fruits. There's a whole bunch of ideas or theories on why Blackbeard can consume more than one devil fruit. But this is where that happens, and Blackbeard is there with the Marines, and they kind of are still wanting to fight a bit. But Shanks actually shows up, and he is the one to stop the war. Kobe actually is here at the war. If you remember Kobe, he was introduced all the way back in Romance Dawn, and we kind of see him every so often with training with Helmeppo and Garp. But Kobe, this is where he unlocks observation haki, and so once that happens, he starts hearing that everyone's in pain, and that they're dying and stuff. And so Kobe, being the kind of pacifist that he is, goes to Akainu and really asks him to begs him to stop the war. And so Akainu is like, what the hell? This little marine is telling me to stop killing pirates? What the hell? And so Akainu goes to actually kill Kobe, but Shanks stops in, brings up Griffin, and just blocks Akainu's magma punch there in a really great scene. Just him and the rest of the red-haired pirates just showing up there. Everyone is confused on how Shanks even got there, because he was supposed to be battling Kaido, actually, just the day before. But here he is now in Marine HQ on the other side of the red line, stopping the war. This is what officially ends the War of the Best. Everyone kind of puts their weapons down. Blackbeard retreats. The Marines start heading back into HQ, and Shanks kind of lets all the Whitebeard allies and the rest of the crew retreat and head back to the New World. This is a major turning point in the story. It really shows the gap that Luffy has to cover to eventually face off against the Admirals and these Yonko level threats that we're going to be seeing in the New World. It gives the first two deaths that we have in the main storyline of the story between Ace and Whitebeard, the revelation that the One Piece is real. There's just so much. It's definitely S tier, and I would honestly probably even say that it is, in my personal opinion, I know we're in some stuff in the New World right now that could rival this. I would say that Marineford is my favorite arc in all of One Piece. After Marineford, we have Post-Marineford. This is where Luffy gets taken back to Amazon Lily. He kind of gets healed up a bit, and we get the aftermath of Marineford, of the War of the Best. We kind of delve into a little bit of the power imbalance between losing a Yonko, some of the warlords have left, and there is a big power imbalance in the world. There is also all these level 6 prisoners that are on the loose from Blackbeard going into Impel Down and breaking everyone out, and the world government actually decides to kind of try to push that under the rug a bit, because with everything else that's already happened, telling everyone that there are these major criminals on the loose just doesn't seem like a good idea to them. Luffy is back on Amazon Lily, and he eventually wakes back up, and he learns that that Ace's death occurred. It wasn't a dream. Everything that happened actually happened, and he is in denial. He's heartbroken, super pissed off and mad, and just begins bawling and crying his eyes out, breaking stuff. He fights Jinbei a bit. He goes just into full depression mode. It is so sad and heart-wrenching to see. You really show how much Luffy cared about Ace, and even though they weren't blood related, they were brothers. One Piece is really a story about inherited will, and that bloodlines aren't the only thing that make family. And this kind of is another time that is really shown between Luffy and Ace's relationship, and how Luffy reacts to the death of his brother. And this kind of goes into the flashback between Luffy, Ace, and their other brother, Sabo. This kind of shows how they all met each other. It shows that when Luffy was 7 years old, that is when Garp actually took him to Curly the Dawn to be raised by these mountain bandits. Garp has to go be a Marine, and so he can't raise a kid. So he takes Luffy and drops him off with the Dawn, and this is where he meets Ace. The Dawn had actually been raising Ace since he was born. So Ace is 10 and Luffy is 7 when they first initially meet. And that just kind of goes into a whole bunch of crazy adventures. They eventually meet Sabo while out in the forests of Mount Kolbo and the Gray Terminal, as Sabo was actually the prince of the Goa Kingdom. However, he did not care for all the nobility and being in the palace and everything, and wanted to be more out in the woods, and he was an adventurous child. And so the three of them butted up a friendship, and eventually the whole events of the Gray Terminal took place, with the Blue Jam pirates taking Luffy and everyone else kind of captive, and Ace going to save them, and the Gray Terminal eventually being torched by the Goa Kingdom to get rid of the trash that they have just been throwing out there, because a world noble has decided to come visit the kingdom. This just kind of shows again more how awful the world nobles are, and how awful the kings and queens of individual islands are, to that what they will do to appease these world nobles. Gray Terminal was literally just a waste of trash and debris that the Goa Kingdom shoved all of their homeless and poor into living. And so when they got word that a world noble, that a celestial dragon was wanting to come to their island, they're like, well, hell, we can't have a massive just landfill of trash and poor people. We gotta get rid of it. And so they go and just burn the whole thing. One of the most awful decisions, and just kind of shows the segregation between nobility and peasants, not just in Mary's Wall and the world government, but even in individual islands, how the world government tells these kings and queens that we don't care how you treat your people. All we care about is if when we come to your town, you make it good for us and you give us money every year. That's all they care about. And so Luffy and Ace and Sabo get kind of caught up in this whole Gray Terminal event and everything. And Sabo decides to run away and leave his nobility behind. He is done with it, and as he is leaving, this is actually when the celestial dragon is beginning to approach the island. So the celestial dragon sees this little dinghy out here in the ocean, and there's actually a small little pirate flag that Sabo has made. And so the celestial dragon goes to blow up the ship and does so. You see Sabo's little hat floating there on the water, and you actually cut and see Luffy and Ace standing on the mountainside, looking over the ocean, seeing this occur, and assuming that Sabo is dead. This kind of doubles down their resolve to train and, in Sabo's memory, head out to sea. So Ace and Luffy train, and eventually Ace at 17 leaves to go and be a pirate. This leads for the next 3 years into into Luffy training and eventually leaving himself, punching out the Lord of the Coast, and beginning his story and to where we are now. We cut back to the present, and Luffy is still crying, and Jinbei is trying to console him. And Jinbei tells Luffy not to think about what he's lost, but to think about what he still has in his friends, in his Nakama, and that he needs to focus on getting back to them. And that's what Ace would want. Ace would not want him to be dwelling on him and be sad and mad. He would want him to use that and rejoin his friends and get stronger and continue heading towards his dream to be king of the pirates. We also check in during this with the rest of the Straw Hats and kind of see where they are everywhere. We see Chopper on the Torino Kingdom. We see Nami on Weatheria with Hardus. We see Zoro training with Mihawk on Kuragana Island. And it just kind of shows them all training everything and then seeing and reacting to the news of Ace's death. Obviously, the whole crew wants to go and rejoin with Luffy, and they know that Ace is Luffy's brother. They all have met him before, or at least a lot of them did back in Alabasta, and so they know that Luffy is taking this hard. Of course he is. However, they actually see a message in the newspaper that changes this. Luffy, along with Rayleigh and Jinbei. Rayleigh has actually shown up to Amazon Lily. He learned from Shocky and everything where Luffy was, and he has decided that he is going to train Luffy in order to get stronger for the next leg of their journey. So Rayleigh, Jinbei, and Luffy actually head back to Marine HQ a couple of days after the War of the Best has concluded, and they do a sail around and actually go up to the town, ring the ox bell 16 times, and throw flowers off into kind of the graves of the dead soldiers. And a lot of people are kind of seeing this as an act of sincerity for the dead and everything. But all of the crew notice that on Luffy's arm in the newspaper it is shown that he has a tattoo. Previously, it was stated that they would try to get back together in 3 days. But now there's the 3D is crossed out, and underneath it is a 2Y to indicate that we are no longer getting back together in 3 days, but we are getting back together in 2 years. This is what kicks off the time skip. And Luffy and Rayleigh head to Ruskina, where Luffy is to begin his training to get stronger for the new world, where he learns Haki and to better his devil fruit. The rest of the crew gets this message and stays on their respective islands that Kuma had sent them to train. This leads into the time skip where it's 2 years and eventually they come back and go into the new world. So it's kind of a lot of setup. It's also a bit of a wrap up. The whole flashback with Luffy, Ace, and Sabo kind of showing where they all started. Sabo's death and how that ignited a fire in Ace and Luffy, even more so to train and get stronger. Kind of going in and checking with all the rest of the Straw Hats and seeing where they are is great. It shows Frankie on Baltimore blowing the whole place up. That's a great scene, and it kind of is the culmination of the first half of the story, all kind of ending with when Luffy goes and puts the Straw Hat on that rock with a little bit of snow falling, just kind of signifying that he will be back and he will be stronger. So I'm going to be putting this in A tier. I really like Post-Marineford. I think it's a good one. Is a really good wrap-up to the Summit War saga and the whole first half of the story in totality. Alright, so this is my final rankings for the Summit War saga. If you have any thoughts or your own rankings, let me know down in the comments below. If you liked anything, give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time.